In this lesson, you're going to learn how to commit the containers changes and build an image with it. You've already copied the source code to the development environment created using this container. Then you went ahead and built the application using .NET Restore, .NET Publish commands, tested the application as well within that container. Now it's time for you to commit the containers changes into an image. And let's have a look at the process. Okay, so I was inside the container that I had launched and I was testing this application. I exited that application using Control C and then run an exit command to come out. This is where I see the container, my dev container is still running. Now I started with an SDK image. Then I modified the container by copying over the source code and building the application. And I have the application now in that container along with the runtime environment that it requires. There are some redundant files also, we'll look at that later, but the application along with the runtime does exist here. And that's what I want to create an image with. So how do we go about looking at the changes and creating an image is what I'm going to show you here. So you can look at or observe the changes that you have made to this container by running docker diff. This is exactly similar to git diff command. Let's run docker diff on this dev container, and what it shows you is whatever changes you have made after the container has been created and whatever files you've added. So I actually get an error here which says that Windows does not support diff of a running container. I have to stop this container first, just like how it does not support copying over the files to a container which is running. It cannot diff the changes also. So I've stopped this container and now I look at the diff, and what it shows me is whatever files I've added, changed, modified after launching the container using the original image, that is. And you can see that C being added at the beginning of the file, which means these files have been changed. If you see the files, D is for deleted. So there are some files which have been deleted. There are files which have been changed. There have been files, or there would be files which have been added. In fact, in case of this Windows container, all the files that we have added and modified come under as C here. Right now, these are the application files along with the runtime environment and any changes that we made to run that application. Now, how do you commit these changes and create your own image is using a Docker container commit command. It's the Docker container commit. We are committing these changes, and that's what gives us a new image to build, right? Or a new image with our tag that we provide here. So we are committing the containers changes. We'll have to provide the containers ID or the name here. The dev represents the containers ID or the name here. You can also provide an ID that's a 12 character ID or a glob for instead of that. So Docker container commit, let's say the container name dev, and then you have to provide your own tag. Now this part is important, so you will have to use your own Docker Hub ID or an organization that you have access to on Docker Hub, that is. So I'm going to use this School of DevOps / the application name that I want to use here. Let's say ASP NET App, and the version, that is V1. So this account should exist on Docker Hub, since I'm providing the Docker Hub as the registry. If you don't provide the registry ID, it assumes as Docker Hub. So this is going to go and be published to Docker Hub. Now, when I commit these changes and create my own image here, this is a local process. While this happens, Docker is not going to authenticate against the Docker Hub and validate this ID right now, but it would do that when you try to publish this image, push this image to the Docker Hub later. And that is the reason why you should use the right tag when you create an image itself, because later on otherwise you would have a problem, authentication or an authorization problem rather, if you use the wrong name here. Now what it has done is it has created an image out of those containers changes. So Docker image ls shows me the changes being converted into an image here. And this is an image with 744 MBs of size. It's been built using this SDK image, which was 731 MBs. So there have been about 13 MBs of additional files that we have added. You can also examine this image using Docker image history and the image ID here. So that's the same ID that you provided here. And this shows me the layers that I've created. So I just see one layer being created by me about a minute ago. Everything else comes from the base image. So the base image had these many layers, and that's what you see here. So Docker image ls shows you the list of images, and Docker image history can help you examine the layers you have generated. So you just learned about the test building of a Docker image manually. Next step is to automate this process.